Hey everyone, welcome to my channel, Books, Gurrs, and Purrs. And today we're going to just be discussing very briefly my April wrap-up. April was supposed to be a focus on Hanif Abdurraqib, and I also read Marissa Crane's I Keep My Exoskeletons to Myself, so I'm going to briefly discuss that as well. And I'll just put these down for a minute. Alright, so a little bit about the author. I didn't get to do a lot of research. I mostly just listened to different podcasts with the author. Hanif Abdurraqib is the youngest of 4 children. His mom passed away when he was very young, when he was a child, and he has written 6 books. One of them is a children's book, and he is largely based in Ohio. I wanted to shout out 2 podcasts where I really love the interviews with the author. My cat is knocking on the door. My other cat, I should say. Books Are Pop Culture and Family Action Network. Let me open the door for my cat. Alright, where was I? I have 2 podcasts I wanted to shout out. Books Are Pop Culture, which have 2 interviews with the author. I've listened to the second one, not the first one that they released. The second one is about the 5th anniversary republication of They Can't Kill Us Until They Kill Us. And also Family Action Network has an interview, but I don't know if it's the same host all the time. I'm not familiar with the podcast, but I'll be listening to both of those for now on. I saw them and listened to them both on YouTube, and I really enjoy the interviews. I love the questions. I love where the conversations naturally went, but also both podcasts, I guess I'll say, really did a great job like asking a question and then just lending the floor to the guest to ramble on, which I really like. Sometimes when I see interviews, certain interviewers will like create these questions that have like too much context added to them instead of kind of getting straight to the point, keeping it short, and then letting the guest speak. So I really enjoyed both of those interviews really much. Alright, so I'm going to grab Hanif's books. One of them I don't have, and that's the children's book, and that's Sing Aretha Sing. And let me see. 2 of these are poetry collections, and that's A Fortune for Your Disaster and The Crown Ain't Worth Much. Out of both of these poetry collections, I enjoyed this one more, but that's kind of biased because I think it's because I listened to A Fortune for Your Disaster on audiobook, and I think hearing the author read his own work, and not just read the poems themselves, but like once every other section or whatnot, the author will lend context to the poem, how it's laid out, how it's read, and all this stuff that I don't know because I'm very much just a novice of poetry. I don't know a lot, and it always feels very daunting for me to read. In fact, I'm reading a memoir right now that has a lot of poetry, and I don't think it's working for me. So coming across an author like this that is so inviting really is touching to me, and I love his work, but you know, I say that every time. Yeah, I'll leave it there. But kind of branching off from the poetry collection, each one of the other books that the author has written has elements of poetry, if not poetry. Like If They Can't Kill Us Until They Kill Us which I've read both. I've read the first publication, and here's the anniversary edition. And plus, let me see, which other one? I'm trying to remember. A Little Devil in America. I'm trying to remember if I'm getting this wrong. But I know these two have each section opening up to, or with a poem first before a section of essays continues. As where in A Little Devil in America uses kind of like the same tactic, but it's not poetry. The author breaks up this into, I want to say, 5 sections that he calls movements in this, because he's talking about performance. But each section opens up with a very short, direct story that he's telling the reader. He's talking directly to the reader, and it's about how he in his life has performed in some way. So that's what this book is talking about, really. It's not just in praise of Black performance in terms of simple entertainment. It's not just about that. It's how a person performs in life, and also like what feats and great heights Black people have contributed and performed specifically in America. And also, I shouldn't just say that, because he does talk about Josephine Baker and her life in France. So that's also true of that. And with Go Ahead in the Rain, a Notes to Tribe Called Quest, I want to say there are some poetic elements to it. I'm kind of annoyed because I don't remember right off the top of my head, but honestly, it's all blurring for me after reading all his work. But I'd have to say every single one of his works has the author included in the narrative. So much of the author's experiences are infused in the story because he's talking about music, he's talking about what's going on in society, he's talking about what's going on politically, and his impact and his observations are important to include to tell the narrative that he's trying to tell. And I also feel like he uses himself in a way to kind of show humor and in some ways self-deprecation, but in a way that's, I don't think is like putting himself down. For instance, when he has his first little 2-page story about dancing to impress somebody, you know, I think he's just being silly, but also saying what he's not capable of at a young age, but then goes on to talk about, let's say, Michael Jackson or other artists that do dance, or people in America that performed in 24-hour like dance marathons, or a person that's a Black person that's a magician, and at the time that they're growing up, and how they chose to embrace the audiences that they had and not shift that, if it makes any sense. I'm kind of being vague because I would rather you read this than me talk too much about the entire thing. But I'd have to say that in every single work, it all culminates in a praise of Black performance. And I feel like that's actually what he's doing in every single one of his collections, whether it's his poetry collections, or if he's writing an entire book about a specific band, or when he's talking about a variety of different singers, songwriters, artists. It's all in praise of Black performance. A majority, except for in They Can't Kill Us Until They Kill Us. A couple of the artists aren't specifically Black, but I do think that I appreciate all these works, and just because those themes are so strong does not necessarily mean that there's anything necessarily repetitive about what he's tackling. They're all unique. It's just you could really tell about what matters and what the author really wants to put out into the world. And I noticed that depending on what the author is crafting in an essay, he'll pair up like a particular artist. So you'll read an essay and it's not just about one artist. It could be about two, it could be three, it could be about several. It just depends on what the author is trying to get across. It's all in service of the narrative that he's creating. And I find that really beautiful and very complex, and I really enjoyed it. All his books, in a way, are a love letter. There's this also praise of vision and inventiveness. And although there's this love of entertainment, it's also this love of like ambition and found family, and all those autobiographical moments really seem to embrace and tie up all the narratives like really beautifully. Throughout the work, the author really touches upon how artists have an impact socially and politically, and I think that was a really big takeaway from all the author's work. And I'm going to go ahead and go to a particular essay in the last book I read, A Little Devil in America. I talked about one particular essay, but I didn't say the essay name when I was reviewing this, and it's on page 112. The essay is called 9 Considerations of Black People in Space, and what I wanted to add on to my review of the book is that the author was juggling so many different elements, whether it's a particular person or a particular craft. He grabbed all these different elements and he puts it all together in one essay. He makes it work. And I was reflecting on this the other night, and it really came to me that this particular essay is almost like this grand literary performance in itself, and as if the author is performing this high wire act of juggling and balancing all these different elements within an essay that really is in praise of all these different generations and contributions and impact, and he still sticks the landing. It still makes sense, and it's really beautiful. And I think that's why I just keep going back to that essay, because it was just so well crafted, even though there's so much else to say about what he writes about, because he covers a lot. Like, even after everything I've said, I'm still very much like scratching the surface. Something that I brought up also before, but I'll bring up again here, is that I have to say in each collection he does bring up Whitney Houston, and that's something else that he tackled, and I can't remember in which collection because there's so many. I think it might have been in either in A Tribe Called Quest, or I can't remember. It might have been this book. I can't remember. Yeah, I was trying to look, but really I'm just going to kick myself because I can't remember which one it was. But I really enjoyed what the author was talking about in all the different ways that he brings up Whitney Houston. And there is Whitney Houston, the artist, and then how she's filtered through, let's say, like a white industry and white journalists and media, and then after going through all those filters in a way, how that creates a perception of her when really she's just always been herself. And that's interesting to reflect on in terms of performance, in terms of how a person is viewed, during their career when it's actually going on, and then reflecting in a past tense way. And he always does it in such a nuanced way that I really love and appreciate, because he just talks about things that I would never be able to really fathom, because his writing is crafted so beautifully. All right, so I wanted to bring up another book in reference to what Hanif Abdurraqib does. And what I'm about to say next is based on everything that he's written, but also a couple of the podcasts that I've listened to, and I heard what the author had to say. And I felt like when the author is talking or I'm reading his work, it reminded me of an essay in The Fire This Time, which was edited by Jesmyn Ward. And I want to say I read this in February. Yeah, time is flying by. What is time? On page 63, there's an essay that's called The Dear Pledges of Love, a defense of Phyllis Wheatley's husband. And it's by Honore Funen Jeffers. I don't know if it's Honore or Honoree, but I apologize if I'm totally messing up their name. I don't know if you can see this. My camera gets blurry whenever I try to get closer. Ultimately, in this essay, what the author is saying is that they were interrogating a narrative about a person from the past, where there's a nonfiction book written about them. But what the author is saying, who is a Black author, is that she's interrogating a narrative that has been written through a white lens, and certain assumptions were made, and that we just need to question the narratives that were written in the past. Who were they written by? And were they written in an objective way, or were they serving a narrative of that time, and ultimately a very hurtful, dangerous narrative that some people want to keep in place today? And I say that all to bring up Hanif Abdurraqib's work, because I think what he's doing and saying also, again, through the interviews I watched, is that he's saying, well, there's this like white supremacist narrative that seeks to push out Black people telling their own stories, and he's like pushing back against that and taking back the narrative, and I feel like that's what all his work is doing, but specifically this work, I feel like he's just like getting all these filtered and manipulated like narratives and like smashing them to the side and being like, no, we're taking back our own narrative. That's what I feel like he's saying, and I think that's really like beautiful, and I love that about this author. And once again, I'll read everything he ever writes. And one of the last interviews I watched with the author, he did say he was working on something else after A Little Devil in America. And so I'm excited for what he's going to put out. And actually, of all the books, when I was reading A Little Devil in America, I felt like I would love if this was like some sort of docu-series on HBO or PBS. I just think that would be really great. You know, it could be like each essay could be a section. I think that would be pretty cool. I don't know how the essay that I love the most would be tackled because there's so many elements, but I feel like if it's in the right hands, it could be incredible. Like, I'm already picturing there could be a different director for each essay, and that would also allow those directors and like co-creators to interpret the narrative that the author has created. But then I thought it could be another great way to celebrate Black directors and crew members and creators. I just think that would be cool. Anyways, so I'll stop gushing about that author. And after all the work that I've read, I still want to talk about Marissa Crane's book. I keep my Exoskeleton to myself because I still read it in the same month, even though each month I'm trying to stick to just like one author unless something is thematically going on that month. But I just picked this up because there's an author, Binks is her last name. I can't remember her first name right now, but I'll add it below like I did last time, that shared the first paragraph, and it was just so good I had to pick up a copy. And so I was reflecting on the fact that this book is about a character that's queer, that's in a surveillance dictatorship government. And I think that to navigate this world, there's so much that the main character is up against. And ultimately, to survive in the world that the author created it here, there is a level of performance, intense performance, that is required to just try to survive. And so that's the connection I found between Marissa Crane's work and Hanif Abdurraqib. And I would go on to say the main character has a child, so it is kind of like a coming of age of that kid from a young age growing up into like maybe their teens. And I'd have to say that it's their child that's really like the one pushing up against what this oppressive society is expecting of them. Yeah, and I'll kind of just leave it there because there's just so much more that I could say, but then I'm just going to ramble on and go somewhere else. But I loved every single one of these works. I'm glad I read them. This has been an incredible reading month. February was an incredible reading month. And also January was an incredible reading month. And so I look forward to talking about all the books for May. And I'm still on that ride right now. And so yeah, my cat is docile, which is nice because she was being bananas earlier. So I just plopped her in there and she was good. If you're watching this, thank you. Let me know what you think about any of these books if you've read them. I love reading so much, but sometimes I get so engrossed in an author's work. Sometimes I feel like I'm overanalyzing material and seeing things that maybe the author wasn't even trying to say in the first place. So if you like this, please press the like button, comment below, yada yada. Apparently it helps with the algorithm. I don't know. I don't know anything about this. I didn't have a chance to watch any documentaries that Hanif Abdurraqib mentioned in his work. My schedule's just a little bit too crazy and I didn't want to wait too long to put out my wrap-up video because I do have so many books to tackle in May. So maybe I'll talk about the work at my next wrap-up, even though it won't really go with what I'll be covering by then. I think I'll try to make it work. So yeah, thank you for watching and I'll see you next time.